Yes. I think we're good. Okay.
Okay, so it's 10:25. I'll call our Wednesday, July 19th, 2023 meeting to order. Do we have any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none, can I have a motion for approval of today's agenda? Jim Downer. Thank you. And can we have a motion for approval of the regular meeting held, the minutes of the regular meeting held April 26th, 2023? Jim and Bill.
Moved by.
I'll second it. And then can we have a motion for the, oh, yeah. Sorry about
Once
that.
the motion's on the floor.
Yes.
All in favor?
All in favor? Thank you, Bill.
And the last one, please?
Yes, all in favor? Thank you.
Equally in favor.
And can we have a motion for the approval of the May 17th, 2023 minutes? All those in favor? Thank you. All right. So do we have any business arising from the minutes?
Just a quick one, mostly a welcome to the people that will be watching the police service board meeting on YouTube after the fact. We do have, of course, room in our gallery. We have two residents in it today, but we've now resumed meeting virtually and recording these and uploading them to our YouTube stream at the town, so people can avail themselves of the gripping Midland Police Service Board meetings, some of which may be really informative to the community of stuff we discussed. So I'm happy that as a result of our change of our procedure policy at our last meeting, that we can now start recording using our new meeting owl. So for those watching online too, you'll notice that the camera kind of records 360 and it will do its best to zoom in on whoever's talking. If more than one of us make a sound at the same time, it may jump around. So just so you know, there's not a real person operating this. You can throw popcorn at when you're watching online. So that's just how this technology works, but we're happy to be back online and just adding to that level of transparency on what happens at your local police service board. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Anybody? No? We're going to skip item 7. We'll come back to that. And item 8, do we have any reports? Seeing none. The financial report ending June 30th, 2023. Has everyone had a chance to take a look at that? So we will be receiving that for information. Can we have a motion to receive that document? You and I guess we vote on that too. Receiving a
You
document.
want a second?
Yeah, or that.
All those in favor? Thank you. Any questions or comments regarding that? Okay, seeing none.
Well, I've got a quick one. So we went to a meeting that was hosted at the tiny recreation complex where the costing formula, I think for the first time for many of us, was explained how the formula works. And a real takeaway for me is that the percentage of the total calls for service that the OBP does all across the province is how our calls and our billing is arrived at. It's not really unique to Midland. So one of my concerns was that, every time I encourage a resident to please call the OBP and get the complaint on file so that they know about it. Don't just assume that your neighbor has called or that the police know about it. Always make a call. Part of me was concerned that every time I said that, I could hear the little cash register ding, that there's another call for service that we're going to pay for. So while that remains true, we're billed on a percentage of the totality of the calls. And I think we'll get a little more detail when our detachment commander can share some of that report with us. But it was really an interesting session on how the costs of policing are arrived at now that we're in the sort of integrated standard billing model, rather than the sort of specialty boutique billing model that we had in the transitional times, the 3 years post dissolution of Midland Police and the adoption of the new contract. So that was really interesting to learn how that billing model worked. And we see that now in play in the way our bills are coming in from the OPP. And these documents will be, if they're not already, be made available for the public so they can review the same kind of reports that we get about where we're at as far as calls for service and the types of calls for service and how many hours are estimated for each type of call. It doesn't mean that they track with any granularity that the guy that was pulled over for impaired last week took, 4 hours and the one that was pulled over the next day took 9. They have an average aggregate amount of time that an officer spends on the average impaired. And that's what's used for our billing. So in totality, when you review this report, it actually does make a lot of sense. There isn't a lot of room for scrutiny. Like there's no ability to dive in and go, why did it take this long? Or, we don't have that level of oversight. And quite frankly, nor could we, because we don't have access to the raw data. But the information we are getting shared in the form of detachment reports and in the billing, I feel a bit more comfortable with how they arrive at these numbers now that we see how this billing model is actually built in for all of the municipalities across the province that are policed by the OPP. So that was a really interesting meeting, and I do want to thank Tiny for hosting that in their rec center for all of us.
Thank you. And,
I can add to
yeah, go right ahead.
and just on that, the billing, OP billing is not the purview of this committee. So that's for council.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
the statistics that are underneath that billing is certainly what the inspector's report deals with today.
Yeah.
But any of the financial side of it isn't for this board's consideration.
No.
Just for so it's on the record.
Yeah, no, for clarification, thank you. Appreciate that. And can I have a motion for the approval of the remuneration report? Let me try that again, for June 30th, 2023. Jim, and seconded by Diana. All those in favor? Thank you. Moving on to correspondence, and I think I'll address that now, and I'll mention it again when I'll mention it to the detachment commander afterwards. We have had a number of letters from a resident of Cook Drive regarding some of the issues with speeding, loitering, threatening, kids climbing on roofs, kids blocking the mailboxes from people having access, and even throwing rocks at one point. And I just want to make it clear that we have forwarded that information to the OPP. We don't deal with actual complaints. We're an oversight body that, just an advisory body really for the OPP. We don't deal with the actual complaints, but we do forward that information to the OPP anytime we do receive it, and let them deal with it from that end. And if people aren't happy with the service they get when that does happen, then there are complaint mechanisms available to them through the detachment commander or through a supervisor at the OPP, and that's how those matters are dealt with. So I just wanted to let the rest of the board know that we have received some letters, and I did respond to the person letting them know how to go about doing that if they had some concerns. So they've been advised. Other business, and we can go ahead with this one. We did attend a meeting recently. Diana was there too. It was the annual meeting of the Ontario Association of Police Services Boards. And there was some discussion about the processes used for bringing in a new detachment commander or a temporary detachment commander. And Diana, did you want to make some comment about that?
Well, it was just my understanding with my training with the province that as part of our role on the board, we're to oversee any new appointment of a new detachment commander as far as, reviewing the candidates and their qualities and so on for taking over the position. And I just had some concerns with the fact that there was someone new appointed. I realized they came to the mayor's at that time before we had our first meeting. But there was no involvement of our board at that time. And I'm quite concerned about that because it was made very clear to me that that's very much a part of our role as the police service board is to be a part of that process. So, and now they're in the process of going through this again, I understand. I understand they've appointed an interim person. And I'm not sure, it was also my understanding that we should really be a part of that process as well as when they do finally get a new permanent person in that position. So I'm just concerned about why that process isn't being followed and that we're not being involved as a board in that decision-making process.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, and that was something that I'd asked too, when we got an invite, and when I say we, I meant the 5 municipalities that are policed by Southern Georgian Bay.
Mhm.
The mayors of each of those municipalities were invited to participate in a panel, basically an interview panel, where I think there was 5 candidates. And we spent the entire day asking questions. I mean, there was a list of questions, and we took turns asking each time, and then scoring them, and basically doing that work. And my question to the superintendent at the time was, not every police services board has the mayor as a member of the
That's
board, nor had we met yet. So I mean, it felt, and I wasn't the chair either. So it just felt kind of odd that it was us that was doing that. And yet here we were, and we needed to pick a detachment commander, and we hadn't met yet. So I brought that up, asking, well, how are we going to manage this in the future if it ever happens again during our term? Lo and behold, the person that, bubbled to the top of our selection list, and our evaluation only accounted for, I believe, 40% of their score in totality. And they'd gotten to that point already and got amassed 60%. The person that we'd selected at the top apparently had opted for another position within the OPP. So that's the way there's competing interests, and whoever offers first, or whatever one gives you the best money, or whatever the deal is, maybe closer to home. For their own personal reasons, they opted not to go to accept that position. So that basically reset the process, and it's going to start over again. So we were left with at the time, that interim detachment commander had already had a plan to move on somewhere else. So Inspector Pittman, who we're going to meet shortly, was given the nod to take over that interim role while a new process is set up. And the new process, I agree, I've asked for clarity and I haven't got it yet, and perhaps fresh from the Tim Hortons for Camp Day, Inspector Pittman might be able to explain what that process is.
Yeah.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for making it on such short notice.
Yeah, no problem. I was thinking for the first police services board meeting, I'm not making a good impression by showing up fashionably late about 40 minutes. My apologies. I did not get that change in time.
Yeah.
Not a problem. And we were just actually talking about something that's right in your wheelhouse. And so remember, Dell was asking, and we talked about this in the past, with the next round of competitions for a detachment commander position. How is the board going to be involved? Because it's clearly articulated in the act, the present act, that they become participants. And the last round I was just explaining was the mayors of the 5 municipalities that are served by Southern Georgian Bay. So I don't know if you're privy to how that is going to look like in the next iteration sometime in the fall. But if you are, this would be a great venue to maybe, clear up that ambiguity for this board.
So I think in response to that, I'm not privy to that. However, I think what I can do is take those comments back to my regional chief and ask that the police services board chair be contacted and have some input as to who that person should be. And if the chair chooses to default to the worship for that, then I think that's entirely within the realm of the police services board decision. But I think really the decision should come to the police services board for that engagement to have a representative on the panel. So I can relay that message forward.
Well, if I could just speak to that, it actually falls to the whole police services board to be a part of that process. So not just one representative showing up and that kind of thing. So anything that takes place within that decision-making process should come to the board as a whole. And then if there's a representative that goes back to the department with that, that's fine, but we're all supposed to be involved in that process.
Okay, yeah, that's no problem. I could certainly make that recommendation up the chain of command and then have a response back. That's no issue.
And certainly any correspondence that I receive would be shared with the
Right.
entire board. So
Right.
yeah, probably
Oh,
through Julie and in any
appreciate
event,
that.
but that's great.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. we can do that.
Thank you for that insight. I appreciate that.
So welcome to the hot seat. And,
Yeah.
yeah, normally we would have done intros because the board hasn't met you yet. And we have new faces in the room. We have our brand spanking new CAO. We have our new acting staff, PC Miller, who used to be, I used to work with, he was a colleague of Midland Police. back in the day, and we have our new acting inspector. So perhaps it would be a good opportunity for the camera and the folks at home when they watch on YouTube to get to know 3 new members that are here today.
Absolutely.
So I'm acting like I'm chairing.
Yeah, no, that's all. That's
Your
all good.
permission, the deputy chair is kind of stepping on your toes.
Yeah.
It's all good.
So, good morning, everyone. Ron DeFun, the, yes, very new chief administrative officer. I started on Monday, so day 3 is underway and going very well. So nice to meet everyone.
Nice to meet you.
And good morning, acting Staff Sergeant Bill Miller, filling in for Staff Sergeant Natalie Major for the summer. So I'm learning all kinds of new things about the other side of policing in this role, and very happy and excited to do that. So
Congratulations, staff.
Yes.
Really good.
And morning, everybody. Inspector Todd Pittman, I'm the interim detachment commander here for Southern Georgian Bay. Been here now, it feels like 3 days, but it's actually going on 2 months now. And it's people often ask me how it's been as a detachment commander. It's my first stint as a detachment commander, and I say it's like drinking from a fire hose. Many of us drank from garden hoses as a kid, just like drinking from a fire hose. So, but all in all, it's been a very good experience, and we have a lot of great communities and partners that we work with. So I'm very happy. So thank you for
Well,
welcoming
Welcome.
us.
Mhm.
thank you. Welcome all. Inspector, would you be prepared to review your detachment report with the group?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So we have our Midland Police Services Board report. So this is the first quarter period that I'm going to cover here, which goes from January to March 2023. One of the first things in becoming familiar with these reports that I'm aware that we like to do is kind of talk about community services, some of the highlights and things that our members have participated in. And it's starting off in the matters of interest is, March was Fraud Prevention Month. So SGB detachment investigated 56 occurrences of fraud in the first quarter of 2023. Police have noticed a surge in seniors being victimized related to grandparents' romance schemes. March 18th to the 11th to the 18th, rather, the detachment received over 13 reports in relation to these frauds. We engage the community not only through presentations, but also through social media education, Facebook, Twitter, and other mediums. And we even leveraged Shop Midland for some of that to help us out. Posters and handouts were distributed. One of the things that I've kind of learned through my career, and I'm sure most of us are aware of, is that even though many people are tech savvy nowadays and use mediums such as Facebook and Twitter and whatnot, some people don't. So I think having those flyers available and being able to post them helps raise that awareness for those folks that don't use those mediums. Educational seminars were also held at the RBC in Midland and at the Escanonia Senior Center recently. And there's more scheduled, which you'll hear about in the next quarter report at our next meeting. GBDSS Bayview Elementary Schools. We have a community services officer. She's featured here, Provincial Constable Linda Durkal, and 3 members from the Provincial Operations Intelligence Bureau attended GBDSS to speak with all the grade 9s about internet safety and things that they need to be aware of. A lot of people put their information out there and think that everything's great on social media, but there's a lot of safety aspects and exploitation and whatnot can occur. It was a really good info session where they provided information on things like online dating, transactions, gaming. A lot of people gamble online now. Also discussed influencers and how they're paid to convince others, sometimes about harmful opinions. And I know it's not a part of this presentation, but if any of you can remember, when they were influencing Tide Pods, a lot of people were eating these Tide Pods and stuff, like silly things, right? So a lot of education about that and just learning our grade 9 students. We had one of our officers attend Bayview Elementary School on February 16th, speak with students about what it means to be a police officer and a community helper. And really getting out there to start to try to influence our younger generation on options for careers for them. And I think on some of the benefits of being a police officer in community. And I know that one of the priorities for Midland here is obviously our staffing, frontline staffing, and making sure we have officers available. And I think it's not unique to us in the police service that we struggle with recruitment now as a whole, right across the province, and I would say even in North America as a whole, but so do other specialized services, even fire and paramedics, EMS, our corrections officers are all seeing a decline, I think, in applications right across the board. So I think the earlier that we can get in, talk about the benefits of a professional career will hopefully pay dividends for us as we move forward. Winterama, now this one's in Penetang. We were out in the community and participated doing some radar with speeds of tobogganers coming down the hill. Top speed was 27 kilometers an hour. Thank goodness there is no speed enforcement on the hill. That's actually pretty fast. My question when I read this was, what kind of sled did they have? So it was, yeah, a lot of fun there. And of course, a tug of war between OPP competing with fire and EMS. And I have to give credit where credit's due. It looks like Penetang Fire got the upper hand on us. So maybe we'll recruit more people next year. If anyone's interested in joining us.
Are you gonna be one of the ones washing their fire truck? I heard that was part of it.
Yeah, I skipped over that part if you've noticed that. Yeah. But all in good fun, and I have not, so what I don't know is if the fire truck washing has yet happened or but I'm sure I'll probably be the one out there doing it, which I don't mind. I'm a good sport when we lose. Big sponsor of Huronia Special Olympics. January the 21st, Huronia Special Olympics hosted a pickleball tournament. We had teams from Collingwood, North Bay, Huronia all competing for Special Olympics, and we had an officer attend to present the medals. Overall, a great success, and a lot of happy athletes that we could have representation there. It was just great to be a part of that, to support it really. We have been a long time partner with Special Olympics. I know I've run in other Special Olympics fundraisers and whatnot, and it's really great to be a part of, to help send our special athletes to the Olympics. Sweet gesture for Midland to the community. Friends at the Midland Superstore delivered cupcakes and cookies. Thank you for your efforts. As a token of our appreciation for first responders here at the Superstore, and our team would like to provide the incredible men and women who dedicate their lives, keeping all of us safe, along with the amazing support administrative staff who work tirelessly behind the scenes, with a gesture of our appreciation for all that you do. It was, and I'll stop there. I won't read the whole thing, but it's nice. One of the things I see in coming back as a new tactical commander and back to frontline is truly how many amazing people and groups and businesses we have in this town. And I'm sure we'll get to other conversations after, but I'm taking a couple opportunities to walk Main Street and just stop in and talk to the business owners. And there's so many good people that we have here. And this is just one example of the gesture we did about 6 weeks. So that was very nice. Traffic issues over the weekend. So now we're still back in February, like 12. Kept officers quite busy. 43 traffic violations under the HDA for a variety of offenses as motorists drove into the attachment area. Over speeders traveling through Highway 93 corridor. Numerous construction crews working to repair hydrant lines along the side of the highway. With a traffic light control malfunction in Waverly, asked an officer to manually direct traffic within that intersection. Looking back at the date, I'm not sure that those were the best favorable conditions in February to be standing out there, but it's a requirement. 66-year-old male from Penetang was charged with careless driving after he sped through the roundabout on County 93, rolled the vehicle into the ditch at approximately 1 p.m. Further investigation led officers to find the involved vehicle to a 3-day suspension for part of drinking driving investigation. We had 12 crashes investigated by officers, which conducted 16 wide check stops, checking drivers for signs of impairment, and investigated negative traffic influence. At 2:55 a.m. on February the 12th, officers were dispatched to a vehicle in the ditch off of Highway 400 in the area of Tropic Bay Road, near the Bay Township. One driver was located upon exiting the vehicle, arrested for repair, and they've been charged with the operational impaired blood drug consequences for seems to be a common theme, you know, when you look. Here again, right, we have more arrests with impaired alcohol, blood alcohol concentration, and an increase use of recreational drugs and operating motor vehicles as well. It's a clear you know, impairment situation that people find themselves in. There's a lot of, I guess, media, there's a lot of public information out there about the risk of impaired driving, yet we still see the infractions. And what's up in front of us here is another example. 3 million hours of March 4th. Our members made 3 arrests, 128 traffic stop on Robin Street, Penn, led to an officer to enter into the traffic driving investigation, resulting in a 31-year-old being charged criminally with failure refusing to comply with the demand, assaulting a police officer, mistrip, further charges under the Highway Traffic Act, using a plate not authorized for a vehicle and failing to surrender the license. All the communications that about a member of the possible impaired driver, resulting in traffic stop on the Sundowner Road right here in town. Investigation resulted in a 23-year-old male from Midland being charged criminally with operation while impaired by alcohol and having a blood alcohol concentration of over 80 milligrams of alcohol. Approximately 3:37 a.m., an officer in patrol had to take evasive action to avoid an unclaimed vehicle. Dual headlights on Heritage Drive, which was low in the vehicle was quickly stopped without incident. The officer entered into a drinking and driving investigation, ultimately resulting in a 29-year-old male from the township being charged for operational impaired alcohol and drugs, and as well as a blood alcohol concentration. All 3 of these based 90-day driver's license suspended is a 7-day vehicle impounds. Noteworthy investigations, some search warrant on Everton Drive here in town at a residence, resulting in the seizure of several tasers, stun guns, rifles with ammunition, along with the quantity of ketamine, methamphetamine, and associated drug paraphernalia. Some photos attached there at the bottom of this page. Execution of the warrant in the afternoon hours of January the 11th, 2023 as a result of an ongoing illegal weapons investigation led by members of the Interior and Provincial Police Immediately Street Crimes Unit, we call them CSU. Attached to the Southern Georgia Bay are really attachments. So often the CSU unit will get members from neighboring attachments to help with drug investigations and warrants. You have to go on the properties. And CBSA, the Community Bonus Services Agency. Officers at the scene were assisted by uniformed detachment members as well as additional OPP Central Region units such as the Emergency Response K9 unit, which is our dogs, and Tactics and Rescue unit. And that's and laboratory investigations response team, along with members from the Office of the Imperial Fire Marshal of Health Canada. Charged with the following offenses in connection with this investigation is Shane, Genus, 40 years old, local resident here of Midland. Unauthorized possession of a firearm, 2 counts. Unauthorized possession of a weapon, 9 counts. Importing a firearm, prohibited or restricted weapons, or prohibited device or ammunition while knowing it's unauthorized, 8 counts. All contrary to the criminal code, and further with possession of a Schedule 1 substance, methamphetamine and other drugs. And smuggling, 7 counts, and possession of illegally imported goods, 2 counts. So some great work done there by local CSU in this investigation and several of the partnerships. It's nice to see this come off the streets. A little bit of a fun story here. I'm happy to see, actually, first time I saw this, I thought, it's a good thing nobody got kicked in this. I don't know how we'd write up that WSIB claim.
Yeah.
But that'd be an interesting one. But officers, it's kind of funny. We provide public safety for communities, traffic safety, traffic enforcement, and clearly responds to all types of calls, including a deer stuck in a fence. So we had a call for service in January down Midland. Officers showed up, deer found themselves in a tight squeeze and need some assistance. Officers gave this deer a hand, and our media folks posted it up on social media feeds and got in excess of 7.8 million views, which is amazing. Yeah, quite a bit of coverage on that. So some great work, and it looks like we've got some officers running on the bottom picture. I'd be all over that too, getting out of there. That's a lot of the community events, just in summary, that we were engaged in the first quarter. In reviewing this report, and I found it interesting. I'm very familiar with the crime severity index, the data, and just looking at it, and in response, and I've spoken with the chair about some of the CSI data and increases in crime and whatnot. And so you're going to see in this first quarter report is actually there's some decreases, crimes down, and that's not uncommon. I think most of us understand that there will be peaks and valleys in crime. There will be times when we have highs and lows. And I'm always happy to report on the lows, not so much from the highs,
Yeah.
but we have some lows here in natural violent crime. So just to highlight, our sex assaults overall change is down 40% from 10 in 2022 to 6 in 2023. Our assaults are down for the first quarter from 28 to 18. That's a change as 35.7%. And then we have other crimes against persons, and those are down 50%. So we're 26 in 2022 to 13, which is clearly nice to see. Overall change, we're down about 40.3% in violent crime. Property crimes, we've had some rises. We've had some break and enter. We went from 4 to 6 from 2022 to 2023. That's an increase of 50%. We're down in our thefts about 20%. Our theft unders, we have an increase of 112.2% from 41 to 87. So we're getting more thefts. I've actually noticed that. I know we're talking with January to March, but I've noticed that since I've been here as well. A lot of the thefts from businesses seem to be a common thing, which I think points to a larger community and maybe societal issue that we're facing as a whole, right? With lower incomes, increasing taxes, and homelessness, and a lot of issues that I think we see in town. And I think the direct contributors to a lot of these causes of we call them petty thefts, but theft under stolen goods, even mischiefs, right? That's very indicative of, and it's not always just youth, it's also indicative of drug use in communities. And that's when you'll see a lot of things happens, alcohol, substance abuse issues. And we see that here. We have an increase in our mischiefs from 12 to 26, about 116.7% increase. So overall, in our property crimes, we're seeing an increase of 65.3% from 2022 to 2023 in the same quarter. Our drug crimes or possession. This is going to sound massive. It's a 600% increase. It just means that we went from 1 to 7 in possession offenses. However, you know, and in being totally honest, I think when we look at problems in communities, right, is crime a problem? I would say if we had any crime, it would be a problem. It's the goal. I think the idea of what we want to see here, and I think we all speak the same, is the lowest possible crime rates and the lowest possible victimization in our communities. So I would actually, I think, yeah, we went from 1 to 7. They're fairly low numbers considering the grand scheme, but I would rather see 1 if I can have my way. And I think that's something that we want to talk about and work towards as a community. So we had a big increase there. We had a 50% decrease in trafficking, which again is going from 2 to 1 from 2022 to 2023. And then ultimately, though, because of the high number, we have 166.7% increase in our actual drug crime. Clearance rates. Our clearance rates have improved somewhat. For violent crime, we went from 53.7% to an increase clearance rate of 57.5%. It's a 3.8% difference. In our property crimes, we see a clearance rate of 28.4%, and in 2023 at 19.8%. So that's a decrease clearance rate of 8.7%. And in our drug crime, we see a higher clearance rate going from 33.3% up to 62.5%. So overall, with our total violent property and drug, we're actually down 9.4%. We have, and then our unfounded calls, so they turned out to be reported as violence, property offenses, drugs, and then it turns out that they weren't founded, so they weren't actually proven, and those have went down. We had 22, and in 2022 we had 29, in 2023 we had 24, so it's a change of a decrease of 17.2%. Traffic charges, HTA, criminal code traffic and non-traffic. LLA offenses, all for Southern Georgian Bay. So it's not unique specifically to Midland, as for Southern Georgian Bay as a whole. We're looking at January, we had 199 HTA offenses, so that's Highway Traffic Act. February, we had 180, and in March, we had 208. So it's not uncommon to see an increase in HTA offenses increase as the weather starts getting a little bit nicer out there, right? You'll start to see speeds go up. And then obviously a lot of our HTA will obviously increase. So in those 3 months, we've issued 587 Highway Traffic Act PONs, provincial offenses notices. Criminal code traffic, essentially we just had one offense in March. Criminal code non-traffic, we had 18 in January, 8 in February, and then we had 13 in March, for a total of 39 this reporting period. No Liquor License Act. And then for other, and if you ask me what other are, I can tell you, I can't tell you right now, but I can commit to finding out what that is we had 36 in January, 35 in February, and 29 in March, for a total of 100 other related traffic charges for each day unloaded traffic. For a total of 727 for the reporting period. Traffic charges, speeding, seatbelts, impairs, distracteds, which are the big four. When I look at January, again, our speeding charges were consistent. We had 120, 120, 100, which is actually a decrease in March, surprisingly, for a total of 348. No seatbelts. We had 1 impaired in March, and then we had 2 distracted driving charges overall that were from charges in January and February. So we have a total of the big 4 charges of 351 for this reporting period. Getting back to the motor vehicle collisions by type. Again, we're going to see we didn't have any fatals for this reporting period, which is really good news. One of the things that caught my eye in this, and this I think is the biggest increase in the whole report, was 800%, which means that we went from 1 PI or personal injury motor vehicle collision up to 9. And I was like, why do we have such a large increase? What was the background on those? And I know we don't generally get into the type of instance in the police services board reports, but I was curious for my own knowledge on what those were about. And I had a member take a look for me. So a quick review of those. 2 of those occurrences from January 8th and 22nd. One was a vehicle rollover in which the driver was charged for careless, so that resulted in injuries. So careless driving, vehicle rolled, somebody got hurt. And a vehicle was sitting in a parking lot. Person forgot to put it in park, and the vehicle rolled and hit a person who hurt them. Yeah, and that was from the 22nd. And then looking specific here in Midland, we had 8 PIMVCs. So 1 was as a result of a medical incident. So the driver was driving, suffered a medical episode, and as a result crashed and was injured. We had a vehicle making a left turn, hit a pedestrian in the crosswalk. Which I find interesting in crosswalks. Another driver struck a pedestrian, failed to remain at the scene. So that's 2 pedestrians. Driver struck rear-ended stopped vehicle at an intersection. So to me, that says that person was not paying attention. Driver failed to stop at a marked intersection and struck another vehicle in the intersection, so not paying attention. Driver did not see a pedestrian. Pedestrian was dressed all in black, walking on the roadway, hit the pedestrian with the vehicle mirror, so flipped them as they went by. Another one was a driver hitting a rear-ended stop vehicle at an intersection, so that to me says inattentive. And vehicle making a right turn in a crosswalk hit a pedestrian again. So, and I know that I had these numbers run now for that reporting period, but I thought it would be prudent on getting some messaging out, if we could, to the community, and specifically, so what I've asked for was I asked for immediate release to the issues, reminding drivers to 1, be attentive. A lot of people out there not paying attention, right? And then secondly, to be aware of pedestrians and pedestrian crosswalks as much as they can, right? And we'll often see it, especially if you go down the main street, and then you see people waiting there to cross, and a lot of times the vehicles won't stop, right? And they go, that's right. And then as a result, we're getting pedestrians clipped. So we did issue a media release that went out. It wasn't during that period. It was when I reviewed this one. That seems to be a bit of a problem. So we did have a media release go out on July the 10th, which I think is just as important now, especially the summer period with increases in the amount of people that come to town. And everything, and then property damage, we actually had a decrease from 94 to 49, from 22 to 23, 47.9%. So overall, we have a decrease of 38.9%. These other fatalities, there's none. Also factors, we have nothing there either. And here, so we've had one public complaint regarding conduct. And that information was collected from our professional standards Bureau Commander reports. That could include any OPRL, or OIRPD rather, so complaints. We have one secondary employment request, so that's a member looking to do something else aside from policing duties within this reporting period. We had quite a few cruiser patrol hours, so a lot of cars out there to the tune of 2,969. From that, we had 16 hours of snowmobile patrol, and we had 224.5 hours of foot, and we had 6.5 hours for that reporting period in the schools.
A quick question if I might. Do you have a schools officer?
We do.
So the only thing, and I was pretty sure you did, and I also saw that you guys did a number of presentations in the schools. I just think this really kind of, that number kind of does you a bit of a disservice because it doesn't reflect all the work I think you're doing in the schools.
Yeah.
So that's the only comment I would have. I think, you know, you've done a lot more hours than that, and that just kind of, I realize this is probably just patrol officers that happen to go in and do that, but I think it kind of throws people off if they're reading that. They wouldn't understand that you've done a lot more than that.
Yeah, and thank you for highlighting that, Mr. Chair. It's true. So I went to one of our detachment commander meetings that we have as OPP detachment commanders, and one of the things that I found very interesting is that school relationships will vary based on jurisdiction and school boards. I am very pleased and happy to say that we have outstanding relationships with our schools and school boards here in Southern Georgia Bay. Second to none, and our school officer is outstanding and is in the schools often, like almost on the daily when school is in. So I would agree that those hours do seem to do us a bit of a disservice, and that they are just from other members captured walking through the schools. And it would actually be nice to show, I think, how much work we're really doing in the schools, other than me saying we're really in the schools. So, but yes, thank you for pointing that out. Staffing updates. So during that reporting period, we've had 3 members accepting roles, transferring out of the detachments, and as a result, we've had 3 new recruits joining the detachment. So that balances us out. I can tell you here in future reports as well, we have another 5 recruits coming in as well. We've had 2 other experienced officers coming in, so see an increase of about 7 other folks coming to the detachment here by September. And no smoke and mirrors. We do have 5 others have either one member was promoted, and then we've got others going on laterals, but we're still up a few members, which is good. You know, I don't think that there's anybody out there in any sort of business, especially in services, where they would say if we can get more help, we'll certainly take it, right?
Yeah.
And we're in that case where I would always welcome new officers and new help to the detachment. So it's good to see that we are getting some. And actually, I think there's one pending that I haven't heard about that hopefully we're going to get. So I think we'll have one more coming here in the short future as well. So all good news that way for staffing for us. Motor vehicle collisions. So we've had between January, February, March, we had a total of 53. So that's actually down. That's property damage, sorry, from 95 in 2022. We've had for personal injury, we have an increase of 10 in 2023 as compared to 2 in 2022. And thankfully, we've had no fatals for this reporting period. I know we've since had fatals, which we'll get to on that, which we're unfortunate. calls for service billing summary report. Now, before I start into this, is it common in a key services board meeting where we go through all the lines in this report?
No, if you wanted to make a comment about it, then that's fine, but I certainly don't expect you to go through that, no.
That's excellent, because I was thinking, one, we got off the ground a little bit late today. And I don't know if we're serving lunch here today.
Yeah.
I think not, so
And your
I
comments,
think we might-
sorry, and your comments would be more for the public than us. So if there's
Yeah.
comments that you'd like to make about it, really for the public's, your section, then that'd be great.
I think ultimately, the report really just highlights, I think, where a lot of our time goes. And I think it's important for the public to know, right, that when you get into, sexual assaults, for example, we had 8 for January to March. But when you look at the weighted hours of 126.4 hours that go into investigating sex assaults, drug offenses, and you'll commonly see that, are quite high as well. But the amount of time it takes, because a drug offense simply isn't just walking up to somebody and catching them in the act, which at times you can, and those go pretty quick. But when you have long investigations that involve surveillance, intelligence gathering, and then you all obviously have the warrant, the execution, and the court time that goes into that. So a lot of those investigations take time. And that's where a lot of our hours will go with this in respect to violent criminal code offenses, as well as drug offenses and other things. So I think it's just important for the public to know that we do have to spend time and provide these investigations with due diligence. It's nice to see the officers on patrol. It's nice to see the officers on foot patrol. It's nice to see the officers in the community. But the officers also have to only investigate these things to ensure convictions in court. And then once those convictions happen, whatever else happens in the court is really out of our hands. I understand that the courts face pressures as well. That's not within our control. And one of the frustrations that you'll see is, and I would hazard a guess without looking at every single one of these, that a lot of these offenses probably involve the same people. Because they are going in and they're back out, and I've seen it since I've been here, where you'll get a violent offense and somebody's in and they're back out in 3 days. And then we're investigating and arresting them again and putting the time in. So there are larger systemic issues, I think, on why we keep dealing with people and things like that. But I think the culture service billing report, if folks take a look at it and wonder, wow, it's a lot of hours. It does. It takes a lot to investigate crimes appropriate. That's all I'd like to see in the past.
Thank you.
No, I don't have that one. That's just more of the billing categories?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, yeah, no, that's fine. Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your report. I just had a couple of comments. First of all, it is great to see the downward trend. I know it's over a short period of time, but in violent crime and the increase in your clearance rate, that was great to see. I also thank you for recognizing the minor thefts and mischiefs. And also with that came the suspicious persons. I saw that went up considerably, right? I also heard some of your media releases regarding fraud prevention for seniors. So that was good to hear. And I also really appreciate the discussion about permanency of social media with the young people. A lot of them don't realize how that's going to impact them in the future. And we didn't, at least I didn't, at my age, I didn't have to worry about things, you said, when you're 15, all of a sudden now appearing when you're applying for a job when you're 21, right? So that's a good conversation. A quick question about priorities, if you could. We submitted our priorities, but obviously you have Tay, Tiny, Penetanguishing, and you provide support to mostly First Nations. So would you have at some point be setting out, or someone setting out, a detachment priority? Because obviously we're not the only one in the picture here, right? So.
Yeah, I think we can certainly do that. I could, so from our action plan, which is really from our detachment, so I can tell you that I believe those submissions. I'm gonna take a guess here, but I would say they were probably done mid-June. I know I submitted the action plan for Southern Georgia Bay and looking at our priorities, and actually with the priorities that Midland has submitted, right? I think they actually align fairly closely. One of ours, of course, is to address and prevent crime in our policing area, right? While ensuring investigative excellence, and I talked a little bit about some of that time. Year-round focus on causal factors of motor vehicle collisions on roadways. So now we're talking about road safety, which is a key priority for ours. And community well-being, I think, which is a conversation that I'd always be interested in getting into, just about co-response solutions on non-police related issues, but often cause police-related issues. So there's kind of that cause and effect relationship that we see in our communities. And I've seen since being in this position, and just talking about, maybe developing some sort of protocols and maybe working a bit more closely with community partners with specific focus, I think may help us and help communities as a whole. Not only addressing but preventing crime in policing area while ensuring investigative excellence, which is ultimately the outcome we'd like to see, is reducing harm and victimization is one of the key priorities in our action plan. And that's just talking about liaising, building, maintaining partnerships with justice and community stakeholders, victim services, intimate partner violence review teams, common attorneys, probation and parole. So the larger justice system as well, and how we all work together and how that plays in. And then just leveraging some of the relationships in our units, like community safety, street crimes and whatnot, and our crisis management resource team, so CMARC. And I don't know actually if for most of our residents watching that we do have a mental health team here in Southern Georgia Bay, where we have a mental health expert that will partner up and go with officers on those calls for service. It actually helps streamline a lot of that time in getting people the appropriate help that they need, and whether they have to be formed at a hospital or not. And it's so what that does is, one, I think it helps raise the standard of care that we're providing and services to the public. But it also helps save officer time. I can remember as a frontline officer, we're going back here talking about age, but I can remember as a frontline officer sitting in a hospital at times for 4 or 5 hours if somebody's there. And the act says that they're supposed to be seen at forthwith, like as fast as we can get them in. But we would often sit for increased times because of other emergencies, and we understand that are happening, right? Medical emergencies that require medical expertise. So I think having that partnership and seeing it since I've been here is really good. Giving some focus to our roadways, obviously waterways. We're surrounded, as we all know, by quite a bit of water here and trails. Year-round focus on factors for motorized vehicle collisions on roadways, trails, and waterways. Seasonal focus, so getting out on our snow machines and obviously our marine units and ATVs as well. And then commitment to enforcing illegal off-road vehicle travel on municipal and county roads, so our broader service area. And there's a lot of, I don't know if you want to cover them all right now, but there's a lot of actions here on how we could undertake that. Focusing on community well-being. I did talk about that core response solutions for non-police related demands for service that impact police resourcing. Transfer of care protocols with the relevant healthcare facilities, and supporting our own employee and community health and well-being, right? So even within the broader community, a lot of our employees, and myself included, are members of these communities that we serve, much like most of us here in the room. And I think that making sure that the people that make sure are okay is very important for us too as an organization, and it's one of our focuses. And looking at streamlining collision reporting as well, on how we can maximize police resources, simplified reporting processes for the motoring public. And there's a lot of other things I think that are happening in other detachment areas and other municipalities actually that I see as well, that remove a lot of the frontline reporting going to an officer that could be off the road. And some of those collision reporting centers are civilianized. So there's a cost savings in there, wages and whatnot. And then it also frees officers up from reporting the really crashes that we don't have to show up to having those reported and captured, but allows our officers to focus on what we want our officers focusing on, which is like visibility in our communities and getting out there and being seen and investigating these crimes that need our attention. So I do have that. I'll consult back with the region on how that gets released formally, that I'm unsure on. But I can certainly commit to sharing that as well with all of you.
It would be nice at some point as a board for us to be able to say, okay, here's what we put forward. We know there was other, areas that also have to be covered. And here's what the detachment's doing, or this is going to be their focus moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Other members, Jim?
Yeah, I have a couple things I'd like to bring up. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the visibility in the community. In the last 2 months, it's increased, like, I was getting calls quite readily about it. People up around the hospital, elderly people in the neighborhoods up around the hospital, we're not seeing any police cars driving through. And now they are. I don't know whether they're dropping people off and coming through the neighborhood, but whatever you're doing is working. And also for speed enforcement, that was a big issue. But I see lots of speed enforcement happening, and that's very positive, and thank you for that. And people are very appreciative of it,
Thank you very much.
not the ones that are getting caught.
They never
But,
are generally.
Yeah. But thank you very much, much appreciated.
Thank you.
I was going to say the same thing in the presence in the downtown, because I have been noticing more presence, and I know that a lot of the business owners were concerned, there were issues and things, and I think that things are improving there, and I think that's due to the increased presence and that I've seen as well.
Mhm.
So yeah, thank you for a good job on helping out with those issues.
Thank you very much. What I could say about that increase, especially the downtown presence, is it's come to my attention, that we do have more, public alcohol consumption on Main Street, and we do have had some reported incidents of indecent exposure, which I will probably liken to mental health issues, as well as drug use, right? So we're seeing substance abuse and addiction issues in our downtown core, and I know that enforcement is only one part of that. But I think that visibility is, and being visible is often a deterrent, right? And I'm sure we've all heard it, but at times, you'd be somewhere and the police show up and somebody goes, oh, thank goodness the police are here now, right? Sometimes just that officer presence is enough to curtail certain behaviors. With respect to the downtown, it's a little initiative in Staff Sergeant Miller have been working on is we have a directed patrol, which means that officers will be downtown in areas, patrolling around those businesses and making ourselves visible. And I've been doing it as a pilot just to see if the community has noticed any change, right? Because the success is kind of hard to determine. What success? Is it saying that we did foot patrol for an hour, or is it 3 hours, or is that 5 hours? But I appreciate that feedback. When I went and spoke with the businesses, I told them that we would be doing that and that we will be visible, and in behind some of those businesses, I know there are problems. And I also committed next week. So on my Friday, if anybody's interested in going for a walk, I'll be cruising down Main Street again, following up with the businesses to see if they've noticed anything and some of the successes on that. And if in fact it has been, we can see that being a permanent thing for us in more officer visibility and getting them down there. I think it's very important for a general, feeling of safety and well-being for the people that are down there shopping and for our business owners to ensure success in business. So thank you both for those comments. That's very helpful to me.
Thank you. Board Member Gordon?
Do you have any more?
No.
I got a few.
Okay.
I'll jump down my list though. Speaking for next Friday, I'd be more than happy to join you on that walkabout.
Excellent.
If you were able to staff this as a more of a permanent directed enforcement, my understanding is we can't ask for and pay for, I know we're not talking about cash here, but it's sort of omnipresent with the enhancements when it comes to uniform. We can only have enhancements to civilians right now. Would the ability to an enhancement, just for clarity for people, is where beyond the sort of catch-all contract where, the police just do what they do and send us an invoice, we can actually make a request, still based on staffing availability and how busy things are, to have extra services provided in our community. And that's called an enhancement, and it's a sort of a separate, statement of work, and there's costs associated with it. Right now, there's a moratorium on enhancements for police officers, and probably because of the short, the short staff situation that everybody has. But there isn't a moratorium on civilians. And what we're looking for this enhancement, or, downtown wouldn't be a civilianized position, it would need to be, frontline police officers. So where I'm trying to go is, would this be considered an enhancement if you were gonna make this more permanent? And would we have any trouble then, writing this up or having it done because there's a moratorium and we can't ascribe a cost to it? You may not be able to answer that right away, that may be a takeaway, because maybe it's not called an enhancement, so we can squeak it in, so we're getting the service without actually paying a specific enhancement. But that's part of the downtown thing, and I do need to applaud you for the fact that you took the initiative on your own, reading the room. And I too have heard it. I've heard it. I've been chomping at the bits to be able to talk about it. You've asked me to not post about it, because people are seeing it, right?
Yeah.
So now that it's gonna hit the outside world, we can talk about it a bit more. So it's really good to see, because just that officer presence is a good term. Know that, and it pays off. And when you have the staff that can do that, knowing full well that to get pulled off at any point for something else, we really appreciate that. So that's more of an affirmation for you guys, that what you're doing is working and being noticed.
Just on, your worship, just on that enhancement piece, so what I think, I don't see like a cause and effect relationship, right? And I'm not suggesting that, we look to enhance civilians and say inclusion reporting center here. We have to really get into the numbers on that to see the actual value for this geographical area. But I think there's a cause and effect relationship. So if we can cause our officers to not have to do sponsorship calls and give priority to other areas, and we can manage that, that may be something that we can explore from an enhancement standpoint of what can we civilianize to free officers up for doing more of that administrative function to allow them to focus their attention. Because the other part on the permanent enhancement to downtown is that an ounce of prevention is what we're coming here. So if we're not as visible, and if we aren't there as much, then what are the effects of that? There will be more calls for service because of the reduced drug use, open alcohol consumption, and potentially other lead acts that are appropriate in the community. So I think there's a bit of a balance act there, but all to say, I can make within my ability, maybe the downtown corner to certain areas, we would have to ship them, or maybe say the whole street and patrol daily on foot. I can certainly direct that from my positions. Can we make it more effective perhaps with enhancements and looking at how we ship that around? Certainly. And I'd be happy to explore that in the future.
That's great. And to be clear, I don't expect anything over and above what you get the other zones, for free from our perspective. But if we have the ability to, have more of your time in zone 5, focus specifically in the downtown core, that will continue to go a long way with our merchants and our residents who express some fear or trepidation at using the downtown. So I'm so happy that you've seen this, and it's not something we can't direct to anyway, but it's not something we have to lean on you for. You're doing it organically, which is fantastic. When it comes to speeding, it's another thing we get constant calls about. Clearly we've seen enforcement at the usual fishing goals because they really are very effective. But we would like to see more targeted speed enforcement in the community, especially in our community safety zones and school zones. And one of the options that we have available to us now that I wanted to get your opinion about would be automated speed enforcement cameras. Not to replace those, but just to augment it, recognizing that it's assigning a penalty to the registered owner of the vehicle, not necessarily the driver, and it will miss all the sort of ancillary things of a regular traffic stop they find, like the odor of alcohol, the girl in the trunk, for human trafficking, all these other things. We know we're not getting that with the camera, but for the to try and change behaviors, is the automated speed enforcement, is that something that you think might be a worthwhile effort for us to consider recommending to council? That there are some budgetary things that go along with it. There's different options, and there's an AMP system that would need to be set up that is inconsequential and does carry a cost. So before I chase that rabbit hole down with the council, I'm wondering if that's something that you would be able to comment on to the board, and then the board could perhaps be the driver to council as we move into budget, if in fact it's something you endorse.
So I guess really, thank you for the question, your worship. I guess really is, you know, the question I think that's staring us in the face is, would automated speed enforcement perhaps slow traffic down and ultimately increase road safety, right? Because there would be an effect to that. I believe it would. If I'm not mistaken, when automated speed enforcement came out on the 400 series highways, I was still frontline hospital. I think I read an article saying that the day that took effect, speeds had increased by like 15 to 20 kilometers. So the average moving vehicle speed, because you know when you get on the 400 series highways, everybody's kind of driving together. You will have that person that takes your door off, right? You're the one that's going to get it. But for the most part, your average moving vehicle speed is fairly consistent, and it's always over the posted speed limit. And I think that we've seen a decrease from 50 to 20 kilometers an hour in that. I've become familiar with the administrative voluntary penalties portion that is available to municipalities. I had a question posed to me other than this one about use of that and how it can be applied. So it can be applied for speeding in obviously designated community safety zones, and as well as some parking enforcement and whatnot. And in an article actually that I found in Blue Line magazine, which is a police magazine, it talks about a lot of the successes that have come with the use of the AMPS program. If the question is, do I think that it could be valuable and help enhance community safety? Absolutely. One of the other things is just on, you know, missing maybe somebody in a trunk. I also don't think that the AMPS program would remove the ability of police officers to still do their daily jobs and still get out there and do traffic enforcement. There is still a function of police and highway safety to be out there, and that would not cease. It's not like we would say, oh, good, we have an AMPS program, now we don't have to do radar patrol in community. No, we very much do, and we still have to get out. I think that program could be effective. I think one of the other things that is very effective and useful for us is that you will get speeders that will go fast through areas, but a lot of people are creatures of habit. So if you think about yourself, I know I think about me, I usually take the same route into work every day, and most other people will as well. So if those people are speeders, there generally will be time frames when you will capture high levels of speeding. And it could be going to work, coming home from work, but traffic data is also very helpful for us to help target and support our speed enforcement, because we want it to be meaningful if we're out there. So twofold, yes, I do think that AMPS program could be helpful with traffic cameras, and your worship, where you allude to, it would be a responsibility of the municipality to maintain. That's not something the police would do. On the other side of that, if we had specific traffic data from speed cameras and whatnot, we could also get out and help bolster that effort. So yes.
Awesome. So to add to that, we currently have speed data being collected from some signage. We have a rolling, you know, trailer, and we also have some fixed signs.
Yes.
That we move around. And that data, I'm led to believe we share with you, or if we don't, we certainly should, because that can help you target, you know, speed enforcement on roads in our community, knowing full well that you're gonna, you know, at least write enough to make it worthwhile, rather than just, you know, random things. So I'm pretty sure Mitch or our team in engineering have access to all that data and would be happy to share with you if they're not already.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, I'm sure we are in a roundabout way getting that data. And the reason why I know we are getting some is within detachment, we also maintain a separate list of traffic complaint areas, problem areas, complaints of high speeding and whatnot. So we do have members that we will, and we have part-time members that come in as well, and we will dedicate them to special initiatives, purely traffic enforcement and getting out and doing things. And actually we're getting 2 more members coming this year that we will dedicate to that. And that's what they'll use, is a lot of that data and complaints from the public to target those areas. So thank you.
perfect. Sorry, I've got some more questions. Maybe we could stop sharing the screen right now so people can see our faces bigger on the recording. Awesome. Thank you. So the reason why I was asking for this is because one of the questions that is going to be asked of council during budget time, well, what is the OP's opinion about putting these cameras in? So just what it would be lovely if, you know, when the time comes to introduce yourself to our council in September when we resume, this maybe could be one of the things that I can ask you through the board. The board can do a presentation at our open agenda item on our council. Just try and plant the seed, because I really like to see an initiative like this at least get debated, if not adopted by council for, something we could do next year. I know some of our neighboring communities are also looking at putting amps for their own purposes, not necessarily cameras. So there may be some efficiencies and synergies in setting up a collective amps program, if that's even possible. I don't know, maybe we have to do it per municipality. Anyway, I'm just glad I wanted to talk about it here and make sure that people knew that we were talking about it. So thank you. The next one was your crosswalk release. That was great. I saw that and it was picked up by all the local media. One of the things that didn't touch on, and I think one of you spoke to it, I think on King Street. So on King Street, we have these things called courtesy crosswalks. So we now have signalized crossings at every road or every intersection in King. We did that since the big day, but these courtesy crosswalks are a bit of a bone of contention because they're well signed that, cars don't have to stop for you. They likely won't. There's a great big sign that you basically, cross at your own peril. And yet there are still people that just because it's a painted crosswalk or not painted in this case, but you can definitely see it on the road, will just walk out in front of traffic and expect cars to stop. So that was something that I felt compelled to weigh in on line because I do get a lot of complaints about our courtesy crosswalks that, cars don't stop them. And that was part of it. They don't need to. And, my argument is soon going to be, well, why do we have these things? They're like, it's like just roll your life dice every time you walk out in front of a moving vehicle. So for courtesy crosswalks, I guess just to talk about it, for the people listening, there is no requirement for, it's just not really a thing. It's no different than jaywalking. Basically, you can just, it's frowned on to jaywalk, and you have to kind of endorse people who use these courtesy crosswalks at their own peril. And I think we're replacing one that was especially problematic for us on William with the fully signalized one, which is not an insignificant span. So to simply replicate that on every other courtesy crosswalk would be a significant tax increase for our residents. So that was, I just wanted to add that little sort of addendum to the crosswalk, because otherwise it was totally factual and just it missed the opportunity to talk about the courtesy crosswalk.
And you're absolutely correct. So pedestrians, so the release at my notes said pedestrians may cross the intersection on a walk signal by a crosswalk signal, which the courtesy don't have, or on a green light, like a green light that's an intersection control, right? So when the green light comes up and there's a directional arrow to allow traffic to advance a turn, the stop hands up, not allowing people to walk. Once that disappears, then pedestrians have the right of way and vehicles have to yield to them. But otherwise, they have to yield to the vehicles. So those are the only two conditions there. So you're absolutely correct, Your Worship. No requirement there to stop.
It'd be interesting to know if any of the pedestrian collisions were at one of these.
Within those, I could have that run down and just to take a look, because really we're all talking about the same thing as public safety, right? If we could do something to enhance that, I would be very much in support of that.
I've never seen anybody hit, but I've seen a lot of close calls.
Oh, yeah, I've because I'm a local as well. I see that driving up the street myself, and all of a sudden somebody pops out, right? You may not see them. And it's like, whoa, and you're locking them up. So there are close calls for sure.
We teach our kids not to step out between parked cars, but there's a lot of adults that still do it.
Yeah, well, there's a delineated walkway on the ground and a sign that, gives the impression that, you can walk, even though it tells you that you don't have to yield anyway. So that was the sort of, I don't want to talk about the crosswalk situation, because I think it's kind of scary. I had a close call with somebody, just about smoke with my truck, and that's what brought it to the top of mind. And then I was talking with my wife, and next thing you know, I see your press release. It's so timely. So at any rate, moving on to the next one is schools. So just to reiterate, I think you were pretty clear, but I'll just put it out there for the record, super clear that in North Simcoe, we don't have any of the issues that they're experiencing in other jurisdictions where police are not welcome in schools. Like I know I'm using this in the negative context. Police are welcome in all schools in North Simcoe. There is none of that nonsense where we see police officers being told they can't attend schools. Is that
Yeah,
fair to
that
say?
is my understanding. Within Southern Georgia Bay detachment, like catchment area, I am not hearing any of those issues.
Good. And if that ever changes, then I'd like to know about that. The second you get any pushback from any of our schools in Midland, that's only where they have any influence over. If that relationship ever starts to fall apart, please loop me in as soon as possible. Because I'm an abject supporter of police officers in schools.
Absolutely.
Okay, going down the list, drug houses. There's yeah, which one? Yeah, they're like the worst kept secret in any municipality. All the neighbors know who they are. There's been one specifically, I won't name the address, but it's been, it's on Queen Street. And there are several others, but that's the one that's been in the news, subject of the warrant, and then also some of the guys from carjacking, were found there or believed to be there. And we read from the, the news reports that the owner of this residence is desperately trying to evict these people from their home. But it takes a lot of time and effort to get through the tribunal, and there's backlogs, and it sounds like they're doing everything they can, but there's a process and they have to follow it. In the meantime, the neighbors, I get phone calls and emails going, what are you guys gonna do? Because we don't feel safe in our neighborhood. There's bandits with backpacks, they call them, constantly walking up and down the street, going to this house and leaving. They're filling in the blanks in their mind, but I don't think it's unreasonable to assume that there's drug transactions happening. And my response to them continues to be, you need to call the police. This isn't something, God, I wish it was, that our council or this board has any jurisdiction to manage. I'm wondering what advice you can offer for people watching this. It was important that we talk about this today as part of this board report, because it's just going to be copy and paste, I think, forever. What are you asking of the community, aside from some patience, while you guys, deal with these homes where drug dealers live, or perhaps doing business from, or other criminal offenses like thefts and frauds and things are happening? You're well aware of them, but what advice can you give the community?
I think with that, your worship, I think your comments on, let us know as a police are very accurate and very well received by myself. I think that the public do need to call us. When you look at Sir Robert Peel's principles of policing, right? It's that the police in the community are one, and that ultimately the police should be representative of the community, and that the community are really the eyes and the ears of the police. We are keenly aware of many drug houses within the southern Georgia Bay catchment area, specifically in Midland. We do have a lot of investigations that are ongoing. Going back to the calls for service report, when you look at drug offenses, how many there are, but the amount of time spent in that. So one, yes, absolutely patience. We are aware of the drug houses. And we do appreciate the calls. And I think what the public need to know as well is that at times in the drug investigation, we may have our street crimes unit, CSCU, they do a lot of these investigations into drug offenses in our communities. And at times the CSCU compiling evidence, and we may need certain information. So a call from the public can be helpful. We may need that piece of evidence to apply for the warrant, and we've been waiting for it. So it's that call that gets us that next step to get in the door. I would ask that, our community members not go out and confront if they are getting fed up. Call us, let us do the approaching, do the discussions, do the investigations. I want people to remain safe, even if they are frustrated. They do take time, but we are aware of them, and we will continue to enforce them. And I think with some specific talk about that place in Queen Street, I think I heard on Monday, if I'm not mistaken, there might be a resolution of that, if I'm not mistaken now. So yeah, but we'll leave it at that for now. So that's the advice I give to the public, for sure.
Great. So that the key takeaway is don't assume your neighbors calling the police, or that the police should already know. Keep calling it in. Yeah, even though technically that increments our billing counter, they need that intel in order to, it might just be that last little bit that allows you to, pass that threshold for another search warrant or other resources.
I think that tidbit of info, maybe there's intel on vehicles going in, so residents are writing on plates and sending them to us. That could be very interesting. It could link to a larger drug investigation, perhaps a traffic related, right? It's no secret that all drugs that come to town aren't just from town, they are coming from other areas, right? They're and so that could be helpful. I think too, it's maybe a perception change, and it's been around I think since the 1800s, but I think that the community should feel like they're part of the community safety solution. that they are helping the police, that we are a representative of the community, because most of us live here. We want good communities, we want well-being here. So I think that if people think that way and they have information that they can provide, to please provide it to us. I think it's important.
Fantastic. All right, so that's good. You know, it doesn't solve the problem, but it's important that people know that we know about this. We're not dusting them around and certainly just not throwing our hands out.
So there are always ongoing active drug investigations in this area. Always, there's no shortage, so we are aware.
Okay, perfect. Moving on, and don't have many more. The Collision Reporting Center, and that's something that we talked about briefly. I mean, I'm quite familiar with the concept, and actually we were sort of early adopters and helped build out the CROM system and the Collision Reporting Center many years ago. If we were at a position, like a location for that, which we might have in our old garage, once we get all that junk out of it, right next to detachment downtown. So would that be a kind of location that would be ideal for a collision reporting center? And if so, staff with civilians, there's no need to have police officers doing these things unless there has to be a charge, which is hard to do after the fact, but whatever, we'll get in the weeds of it, but would that cost for something like a collision reporting center? Would that be borne specifically by Midland because we would host it? Or is that something that, you know, if there's an accident in Tay or Tiny, we would direct everybody to come into that central collision reporting center? Therefore, that could be a cost that is shared amongst our neighboring municipalities. Probably not so Georgian Bay Township, but you know, realistically, the Penetang, Midland, Tiny Tay. Is that something we should have a sidebar on? It might be out of the scope of the police board per se, but I've definitely, since you brought it up, it's something that's piqued my curiosity.
Yeah, I think it's something we should have a sidebar on. That whole cost sharing piece, so that would make sense to me. As for a location, the type of services that the structure would have to have, and how collision reporting centers are actually constructed and modeled, that I'm not too sure on. But we can most certainly have a sidebar and look into the art of the possible and how that cost will be borne and shared.
Great, because we can, you know, keep officers on the road doing other things and just have the mundane traffic reports for, you know, 95% of them more handled at a collision reporting center, that could really bring about some efficiency. So that's great to hear you're on that one. There's two things that involve new detachment. So new detachment, the building is something that, just to let people know, and it's not, again, not really board 100%, but there is an opportunity, because clearly there's a need for a new detachment. There's an opportunity for Midland and our partners in the North Simcoe to express an interest in building a new detachment for the OPP and then leasing it to them. And that could be an opportunity we're going to talk about at a higher level in this chamber with council to perhaps build a campus style thing. It could be fire and EMS, which would bring in funding sources from other places, but the growth needs for this detachment, you know, are not going away as we grow the municipality. The needs are only increase, and you guys are already bursting at the seams. So I just wanted to throw it out there that that's an opportunity that we're going to be exploring as a municipality here, and then also exploring it with our neighbors if need be. But the biggest piece of news really is that new detachment board, which is coming down the pipe, that's going to replace this board as a board and become this new sort of centralized detachment board. So you're not having to do this whole horse and pony show, 5 locations at regular intervals. And I'm just wondering, does it belong with this report, or should we talk about that at some other place? It'd be good to just let the public know what's going on with that and the expected timeframes and what's happening. It's not really, to some degree, you can answer that, but
Well, I think it's more coming from the province per
Yeah,
se than.
I think
from-
it does come from Solgen, right?
Yes.
It's an initiative there. They will be called OPP detachment boards, and they will be comprised of representatives from all 5 municipalities that we serve. That's my knowledge of it, and that's pretty much all I know.
okay.
Well, I think Mike could probably speak to that too. We were
Yeah,
just-
there is a working group forming as far as rewriting the bylaws and procedures for that board. And I'm working with them right now. But at the same time, we don't know a definitive date, and unless someone else at the table can help me out, there's no definitive date set yet for that to happen.
You know, they wanted to have things in place, I think, by the end of this year, beginning of next year.
Mhm.
But I mean, they've been saying that for a couple of years now.
So there's an evolution at play.
Yeah.
And maybe
But
we
it's
just leave it
really
at that for now. but-
directed by the province, though, in the Solicitor General's office, and they're dictating, as far as we know, it's already been read and passed, I believe. Julie, you were on top of that when we were at the conference, but I believe it's already been read through and passed at the provincial level. So now it's just a matter of implementation and getting things rolling with each of the areas doing their part to get the new board in place.
All right, well, then in respect to your report, I think that covers all the things I wanted to highlight and it's good, like, it's good information not only for this board, but for the folks that'll be able to follow along. To know that we're, none of this is lost on us and you guys are working on it and what role the community has to play. Which is to keep reporting, just keep reporting. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Could I have a motion that the 2023 first quarter report as presented by the Southern Georgian Bay Acting Detachment Commander be received for information?
So moved.
Thank you, thank you. All those in favor? Thank you. Figure. I think that's all we have. Any other? That's it. Only other thing, one quick plug for Tim Hortons. It's their camp day today. And it is a worthwhile cause whenever you can give kids that opportunity to build confidence and relationships and, you know, meet positive peers and positive leaders in our community. It's a great thing. And I thank our OPP for attending and serving some coffee and tea this morning. Much appreciated. But
I'll be
other than that,
I'll be at 93 around 3 o'clock.
oh, there we go.
An hour or two or until I get kicked out of there. I keep messing up the orders or eating Timbits.
Thank you, Your Worship. And so could I have a motion that this Midland Police Services Board regular meeting held July 19th, 2023 be adjourned at 11:54 or 11:54?
Move that we adjourn the meeting.
Yeah. Bill, all in favor? All in favor?
Right on.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks for arriving on the spur of the moment there.
And
After not.
you have to turn that.
Goodbye, all.